My favorite thing about this though is that it has a detune knob, which I don't know specifically how it works, but what it does, it sends, I think, a random amount of oscillation to the tune knob here. And you can get these really kind of psychedelic tones almost. It's great for builds, risers, and dropping back into the track.
What is up? Felix Wehr here for Thomann Synthesizers, here from our studios in Berlin. And today I have an exciting guest with me. ASEC, super exciting newcomer here from Berlin, recently had his debut performance at Tresor, and since then you've refined your live set a bit and brought it with you here today. So yeah, thanks for coming by.
Of course, thanks for having me. Excited to play a little bit and talk a little bit about what I'm doing today.
Yeah, looking forward to check out your setup.
I'm going to talk a little bit about what I just did there and kind of the general setup. So I think the first thing to say is that most people, when they talk about having a live set for electronic music, they think about having a sort of a brain or a heart of their setup, and usually they're referring to like a fancy sequencer, something like the Octatrack or something else in that kind of range. I don't think about it like that. I think of each kind of machine as having its own brain and its own heart, each machine being its own kind of organism or whatnot. So I do use a sequencer, and that's basically just sending very simple patterns to the modular. So I will talk a little bit about that first. So I'm using the Arturia BeatStep Pro as a sequencer. It's a very simple kind of sequencer, but super effective and really useful. There's 3 channels here. I'm not using the 3rd drum channel. The drums are all coming from the sequencer on the analog Rytm. So let's look at these 2 sequencer channels here. So these are patched to the modular. I'm using mainly 2 oscillators, one from the Moog DFAM, which is the drummer from another mother. I think that's Moog's drum machine. However, I tend to use it as more like a crunchy square wave lead kind of oscillator sound. And I really like this because it very much cuts through the mix and almost bullies the mix if you take it too far. But let's hear what that sounds like, maybe. Cool. There we go. You can hear it's sort of very techno type sounding, quite bleepy. But you'll also notice how crunchy it is, and there's a little bit of distortion on that, but not too much. It really does cut through. Hear it. Cool. So that's the one oscillator that I use, and you might be able to hear it in the performance. As well as that, I also use this Erica Synths bassline, which is the module here. In using that, I'm kind of trying to replicate this really simple, I guess, sounding oscillator, a very clean sounding oscillator. And you can hear how that sounds. It's very clean. There's a little bit of delay on that. But I'm trying to replicate a little bit of the more vintage sounding, plucky synths that I have in my studio or at home, and be able to bring that on the road in the case. My favorite thing about this, though, is that it has a detune knob, which I don't know specifically how it works, but what it does, it sends, I think, a random amount of oscillation to the tune knob here. And you can get these really kind of psychedelic tones, almost. It's great for builds, risers, and dropping back into the track. So those are the 2 main oscillators in the modular. I'm not really doing anything super fancy inside this case. I'm really trying to keep it very simple and stick to kind of pure oscillators, but I do have some processing. I'm running into the VCF from the Erica Fusion range, and mostly that's because I want to provide a little bit of tube warmth from the inbuilt tube here. I also have a distortion module from the Ritual Electronics miasma, however you want to say that. And that provides just a little bit of crunch. But you can go quite extreme with this. So maybe give a demonstration. Give these almost kind of guitar feedback sounds, which is great for a riser and a drop. Pretty interesting. Cool. So that's mostly what I'm doing in the case, and I have a Wasp filter from Doepfer here, which is literally just taking a little bit of the lows off. It's just a high-pass filter to take away some of the lows here, so they don't interfere with the drums. The other interesting thing maybe about the case is that there's a spring reverb in here, and it's mounted inside the case. If I just stop the sequence, maybe we can hear the spring. So it's kind of like an old school synth, or maybe even an amplifier, a guitar amplifier that has a spring in it. You can really hear that in there. And that's coming out of the Erica Synths Black Spring reverb. Cool. So after that, so after we run into the modular, we then end up in the Strymon Timeline, which is my delay pedal. I really like this because I've kind of always been attracted to this jangly sort of guitar sound, especially growing up in the UK. Bands sort of like The Cure or New Order or Joy Division and whatnot. And they're often using this like dotted eighth delay on the guitar. And I was always really attracted to that when I was playing guitar growing up. And I guess I just bring that across. So really this is doing quite a simple dotted eighth delay. And we can maybe hear that a little bit. You can hear it. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, nothing too extreme, but just something to fill a little bit of the space out. Obviously with live, and especially with modular, it's kind of important to make sure that some of the sounds are somewhat processed to fill out some of the space. Cool, so after that, I then run everything into my audio interface, and finally we go into this FMR audio really nice leveling amplifier. It's kind of the sibling of their really nice compressor. And this one, I believe, has a little bit more color. It's a little bit thicker sounding. Well, that's what FMR Audio has on their website, at least. So yeah, it's a really cool unit, and I really like it just to add a little bit of push and pull and kind of dynamics on the tops. Cool. So let's maybe talk about drums. I'm using the analog Rytm from Elektron. Surprise, surprise. It's becoming, I think, a classic drum machine if it isn't already. And I think in a few, maybe 10, 20 years, people will probably talk about these units in the same way they talk about the Roland units. They are like workhorses. They're just really, really useful. So what do I have here? I'm basically, in my live, playing a lot with mutes, and I'm mostly using a single kit. I do have other kits, but let's maybe hear what some of this sounds like. So we have some kick drums and subs as well. I think it's really important. Kick on its own sounds very empty. Sub pattern really fills everything out. It's a typical techno kick bass type thing. In order to make the set feel a little bit more dynamic and move a little bit more, I generally tend to switch kicks. And I have two other kicks programmed here as well, so you can get something like this, maybe with a riser. So then you get the next pattern. So it kind of sounds like a DJ set. Often what I'm trying to do is kind of mimic how DJs move in their sets. And maybe that's not necessarily the right thing to do in a live, but it's something that really keeps me dancing and keeps me moving. So that's my approach. So what else do we have here? Pretty simple stuff. Closed hi-hats, open hi-hats, some shakers, kind of lots of tops just to keep it interesting, because as I said, I'm not really switching through patterns so much. I'm more playing with the mutes and playing with the volumes of the mutes to get small variations. One of the things I do really like, and you probably see this in a few of the performances, is that I have on this pad, I have a white noise oscillator mapped. It's a white noise oscillator mapped with a really long decay, so you end up getting this white noise riser type sound, which is nice for a build or a drop. Cool. So that's the analog Rytm. I'm not using any samples, really. If I do, they are samples that I've recorded, but they're generally, this is mostly oscillation, so everything has an oscillator. Everything is coming from the unit, from the synth. Cool. What else? I'm also using this Elektron Digitone, which is Elektron's digital synthesizer, like the mid-range synthesizer. I really like it for live because it has these interesting different tracks here, so then you can have multiple sequences across different tracks, which, as I said, because I like this DJ style thing, it allows me to almost mix in each track using the level knob here. We can hear what some of this sounds like. Great. There's like a bit of a dubby sound. It obviously sounds really digital, but I think for what it is, especially when you play it off of the modular, more analog sounding stuff, it really plays well and fills up the space. And you can get really interesting sound combinations, I think. And the thing I love about this as well is the pattern switching is so easy. Holding down the pattern button, simply moving to another pattern. Super easy. It's kind of simple, actually, when I think about it. So yeah, that's pretty much most of the setup. It's not super extensive, but I like to treat, as I said, each unit as its own instrument, and I'm really into almost like playing the instrument as opposed to building macro changes at the top level. So it's something that I really kind of invest time in. And yeah, so that's most of the setup. The final thing to talk about, maybe this little sequencer here from 1010 Music. It's a Blackbox, and it's the way I would think about this is kind of like Ableton Live squashed into an iPhone or something. It's like it's hand-sized also, so it's really good for the live use. I don't really do a lot of sampling on this, but what I generally tend to do is I run atmospheres from here. So I have 4 channels with different atmospheres, and I can simply mix them in and out throughout the set, basically. So it basically just kind of pads. And there are some rhythmic things on here as well that I've recorded. Again, sort of add some texture and fill out the space. This is really just used as almost a utility to add some extra personality to the different parts of the live. Okay, cool. So I think that's about it. If anyone has any questions about the setup, about any of the equipment here, I'd be super happy to answer in the comments. Thanks for watching, and thanks a lot.